The distress beacon had been screaming into the void for 300 years. Nobody heard it until Admiral Torin's science officer noticed an odd pattern in the background noise of deep space. The signal came from a remote spiral arm, a region most spacefaring species avoided because there was nothing interesting out there. Just dust, rocks, and a few yellow stars that had never been surveyed properly. Mira studied the decoded message with growing confusion. The translation software couldn't make sense of most of it, but certain words came through clearly enough. Help, danger, unknown threat. The coordinates pointed to a small system with 9 planets, one of them apparently inhabited. "This changes everything," she told Torin during their meeting in the fleet command room. "Someone out there needs us. A civilization that never developed faster than light travel but somehow managed to send a signal this far." Torin belonged to the Vithari species, tall and slender creatures who evolved on a peaceful world with light gravity. His people had joined the Galactic Communion 2,000 years ago, and now served as one of its primary peacekeeping forces. The Communion protected younger species, helped them develop, and kept aggressive empires from enslaving primitive worlds. "How long until we can reach them?" Torin asked. 4 days at maximum speed. The signal is old, Admiral. Whatever threatened them might have already destroyed their civilization. But we have to try. Torin assembled a fleet of 47 vessels. It seemed like overkill for a rescue mission, but the Communion had protocols. Unknown situations required overwhelming force. Better to arrive prepared than to need help that would take weeks to arrive. The fleet departed from Communion space with high hopes. Officers and crew talked excitedly about making first contact with a new species. Mira spent hours studying what little information the signal contained, trying to piece together details about the mysterious aliens. Their mathematics suggested they understood physics well enough to build rockets. Their chemistry indicated they breathed oxygen. Beyond that, everything was speculation. 4 days later, the fleet emerged at the edge of the unknown system. Pilot Wren sat in his fighter cockpit, running routine patrols around the capital ships. He loved flying, loved the freedom of space, loved knowing his skills protected others. Today felt special. They might save an entire species from extinction. Then the sensor readings started coming through and everything changed. "Admiral, we have multiple contacts," the sensor operator reported. "Artificial satellites in orbit around the 3rd planet. Debris fields suggesting recent construction, and, Admiral, I'm detecting vessels. Dozens of them." Torin leaned forward in his command chair. "Vessels? Are you certain?" "Confirmed, sir. They're primitive by our standards, but definitely spacecraft. Some in planetary orbit, others near the 4th planet. They appear to be mining operations." Mira arrived at the command center moments later, her face showing the same confusion Torin felt. "This doesn't match the signal at all. These people have an active space program, multiple facilities. They've industrialized their entire orbital space. Could the signal be from a different species?" Torin wondered aloud. Before anyone could answer, the communication systems lit up with activity. Someone was hailing them. The message came through in electromagnetic waves, crude but effective. The translation software struggled with the language, catching only fragments. "Unknown vessels. Identify yourselves." "This is Earth Defense Force. Respond immediately." "Earth," Mira repeated. That must be their name for the planet. Torin ordered his communications officer to respond using standard first contact protocols. The Communion had refined these procedures over millennia. They broadcast messages of peace in multiple formats, demonstrated their non-hostile intentions through careful ship positioning, and requested dialogue. The response from Earth came swiftly, but not in the way Torin expected. Multiple weapon systems locked onto his fleet. Energy signatures spiked across the planet's surface and throughout the orbital infrastructure. More vessels emerged from hidden positions, moving into defensive formations. "Admiral, they're treating us as hostile," his tactical officer warned. "We haven't done anything threatening," Torin protested. "We're here to help them." Wren watched from his fighter as the situation spiraled out of control. The human vessels moved with surprising speed and coordination. Their formation showed military discipline. These weren't peaceful explorers. These were warriors. A small human patrol ship approached the Communion fleet's perimeter. Torin ordered his ships to hold position and avoid any aggressive actions. They would demonstrate peaceful intentions through patience. The human ship fired. The shots were primitive kinetic weapons, simple metal projectiles accelerated to high speeds. They shouldn't have posed any threat to communion shields, but the sheer velocity behind them exceeded anything Torin had seen from a species this young. 2 rounds penetrated the shields of a communion destroyer and punched through its hull. Alarms blared across the fleet. Crew members scrambled to emergency stations. Ren heard the panic in the communication channels. "Return fire?" his tactical officer asked. "No," Torin commanded. "This is a misunderstanding. They're afraid of us. Send another message. Tell them we mean no harm." But the humans weren't listening anymore. More ships emerged from Earth's orbital stations. Larger vessels with weapons that looked disturbingly practical. The human fleet moved into attack formation. Mira pulled up everything her sensors could gather about the planet below. Her screen filled with data that made her blood run cold. "Admiral, this planet is a nightmare," she whispered. "Gravity is 0.8 times standard. Atmospheric oxygen is dangerously high. Temperature ranges are extreme. The weather patterns show frequent violent storms. This is a death world." Torin didn't understand. "What do you mean?" "The species we're facing evolved in conditions that would kill most of us. They're stronger, tougher, and apparently much more aggressive than anything we've encountered. We didn't come to rescue a helpless civilization. We wandered into the territory of apex predators." The human fleet opened fire across all positions. Ren watched in horror as kinetic rounds and missile salvos filled the space between the 2 forces. The communion fleet activated shields and defensive systems, still trying not to escalate. But deep in the back of Torin's mind, a terrible realization began to form. The distress signal had never been a call for help. It was just an old automated beacon from some forgotten satellite. The communion had interpreted desperation where none existed. They had made a catastrophic mistake. And now, surrounded by an angry species that evolved to survive the unsurvivable, the communion fleet faced a choice: retreat in shame or stand their ground. Torin looked at the tactical display showing dozens of human vessels closing in. "Prepare for defensive action," he ordered quietly, "and may the ancestors forgive us for what we've started." Olivia Hayes hated being right about alien invasions. For 15 years she had argued that Earth needed stronger orbital defenses. Politicians called her paranoid. Budget committees laughed at her projections. The public thought she was a warmonger stuck in old thinking. Then 47 unknown vessels appeared at the edge of the solar system, and suddenly everyone wanted her opinions. General David Park coordinated the defense response from his command center, buried 300 meters below Geneva. Screens showed the alien fleet maintaining position near the outer planets. They had been there for 6 hours, scanning everything, broadcasting incomprehensible messages that might be threats or might be hello. "They're testing our responses," Olivia explained to the Joint Command Staff. "Every move we make gets analyzed. They're learning our capabilities before they strike." "Maybe they're peaceful," someone suggested. Olivia pulled up the tactical data. "Peaceful species don't arrive with 47 warships. They don't scan our entire infrastructure with military-grade sensors, and they definitely don't ignore our request to identify themselves." Dr. Samantha Cole, Earth's leading expert in theoretical xenolinguistics, worked frantically to decode the alien broadcasts. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, studying patterns and creating frameworks for understanding non-human communication. Now facing actual alien signals, her carefully constructed theories fell apart. "Their language structure is completely alien," she reported to David. "I'm getting fragments, concepts that might mean peace or cooperation. But I can't be certain. What if I'm wrong? What if I tell you they're friendly and they're actually declaring war?" David understood her fear. One mistranslation could doom humanity, but sitting idle while aliens positioned themselves in Earth space seemed equally dangerous. The patrol ship Vigilance encountered the alien fleet during a routine check of the outer system. Lieutenant Morris commanded the small vessel with a crew of 12. He followed protocols, approached cautiously, requested identification. The aliens responded by targeting his ship with multiple weapon systems. Morris made a split-second decision. He fired 2 warning shots across the lead alien vessel's bow, the traditional naval signal for stay back. The rounds traveled at .03 light speed, deliberately aimed to miss by safe margins. Both rounds punched through the alien ship's shields and tore holes in its hull. Morris stared at his screens in shock. "How did we penetrate their defenses?" His weapons officer checked the readings twice. Sir, their shields are designed for energy weapons. Our kinetic rounds just ignored them, and their hull material is soft. Really soft. It's like shooting through plastic. The aliens scattered, breaking formation in apparent panic. Morris reported the engagement immediately. Within minutes, every human military vessel went to combat alert. Olivia took command of the Earth spaceship Retribution, humanity's largest warship. Built after the mining colony attacks 5 years ago, it carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Olivia never wanted to use that power, but she would if necessary. All ships, defensive formation around Earth, she ordered. Civilian traffic clears orbital space immediately. Someone get me a communication line to those aliens right now. The alien fleet reformed and advanced. They moved with clear purpose, approaching Earth directly. Their formation suggested attack vectors. Their weapon systems showed active status. David activated Earth's hidden defense platforms, military secrets that had consumed massive portions of the budget. Weapons arrays emerged from asteroids, moons, and disguised satellites throughout the solar system. Centuries of paranoid military planning revealed itself in moments. The aliens halted their advance, apparently shocked by the sudden appearance of hundreds of weapon platforms. They broadcast another message. Samantha worked desperately to translate it. They're saying something about peace, she reported, and protection. They think we need protection. Protection from what? David demanded. I don't know. The translation is fragmentary, but they seem confused about why we're hostile. Olivia studied the alien formation. They had weapons active but weren't firing. They were advancing but slowly. Their positioning suggested they were trying to appear strong while avoiding actual combat. They expected to intimidate us, she realized. They thought we'd surrender as soon as we saw their fleet. The communication channels lit up with alien broadcasts. The translation improved slightly. Words came through clearer. We help, we protect, we communion. You need us. They think we're helpless, David said quietly. They think we're some primitive species waiting to be rescued. Olivia felt anger rise in her chest. Humanity had clawed its way into space through wars, disasters, and near extinctions. They had rebuilt from climate collapse, survived asteroid impacts, and unified a fractured world. Nobody rescued humanity. Humanity saved itself. Show them what we are, she ordered. The human fleet engaged. Ren had trained for combat his entire adult life. He was Vithari, a species bred for careful thinking and precise execution. His people had fought wars before, though not many. Most species surrendered when faced with communion firepower. Those who resisted usually collapsed after the first few salvos demonstrated the technological gap. These humans didn't collapse. They accelerated. Ren watched in horror as human fighters pushed their engines to impossible levels. The acceleration would kill most species. Even Vithari could only handle 3 times standard gravity for short bursts. These humans sustained forces that should have turned their bodies into paste. They're insane, Ren reported to his squadron leader. They're pulling 8 standard gravities and they're not slowing down. The human fighters crashed into the communion formation like meteors. They fired their weapons at point-blank range, accepting hits to guarantee their own shots connected. 2 human fighters rammed a communion destroyer when their weapons ran dry. Both human pilots survived the collision. Their ships disintegrated. But the pilots ejected in armored suits and continued firing handheld weapons until pickup craft retrieved them. Admiral Torin watched his fleet take damage it should never have received. Communion shields worked perfectly against energy weapons, but these primitive kinetic weapons just punched through. And when human ships took damage, they didn't retreat. They kept fighting with exposed sections, venting atmosphere, systems failing. One human destroyer lost its entire forward section but continued to fire its rear weapons. How are they still fighting? Torin asked Mira. She pulled up her analysis of human biology. They have backup organs, Admiral. Redundant systems. They evolved to survive injuries that would kill us immediately, and their planet's high oxygen content means they can function in lower atmospheric pressure. That destroyed human ship isn't disabled. It's angry. The battle raged for 3 hours. Communion ships tried to maintain distance and use their superior range. Human vessels closed relentlessly, accepting damage to deliver devastating close-range attacks. 15 communion ships sustained critical damage. 8 human vessels were destroyed, but their crews mostly evacuated successfully. Torin considered retreat. But retreat meant admitting weakness. It meant telling the entire galaxy that the communion peacekeeping fleet ran from a primitive species. The political consequences would be catastrophic. Then Samantha finally cracked the communication barrier. She established a crude translation protocol and opened a direct channel to the Communion flagship. "Stop shooting," she screamed in broken Communion standard. "This is mistake. We no need rescue. Signal was accident." Torrin heard the words and felt his world collapse. What signal? Old satellite. Broken, automatic. You came for nothing. We no ask help. The realization spread through both fleets simultaneously. The distress signal was nothing. The humans hadn't called for rescue. The Communion had invaded a sovereign species territory based on a 300-year-old automated beacon. Both sides ceased fire, hanging in space amid debris and damaged ships. Torrin felt shame unlike anything he had experienced. His people prided themselves on helping younger species. Instead, they had attacked them. Olivia received the translation and felt her anger shift to exhausted frustration. They thought we needed help? The signal they received was from Voyager 3, Samantha explained. A probe we launched centuries ago. It had emergency protocols that continued broadcasting long after the probe died. They interpreted it as a distress call. Both fleets prepared for tense negotiations. Ships established safe distances. Medical teams treated wounded. Salvage crews searched for survivors in the wreckage. Then new sensor contacts appeared at the system's edge. A massive fleet far larger than the Communion force. Their ships bore markings that made Torrin's blood freeze. "Hlath Dominion," he whispered. Olivia saw the panic on Torrin's face through the communication link. "Who are they?" "Slavers," Torrin answered. "Conquerors. They've been tracking my fleet. They waited for us to weaken ourselves. Now they've come to claim both our species." The Hlath fleet numbered over 200 vessels. Their leader broadcast a simple message in multiple languages. "Your war is over. Surrender or die. You have 1 hour." Olivia looked at David. David looked at Torrin. Torrin looked at his damaged fleet. Then Olivia smiled grimly. "Well, Admiral? Looks like we're on the same side now." The Hlath Dominion had conquered 17 species in the last century alone. Their strategy never varied. Identify weakened systems, arrive with overwhelming force, demand immediate surrender. Most civilizations submitted within hours. Those who resisted faced orbital bombardment until their infrastructure collapsed and survival became impossible. Leader Kreth studied the tactical display from his command ship's war room. 2 fleets had just finished destroying each other over a primitive blue planet. Perfect timing. The Communion peacekeepers were reduced to 32 functional vessels. The unknown locals had lost nearly a quarter of their forces. Both groups were wounded, disorganized, and perfectly positioned for conquest. "Send the ultimatum," Kreth ordered. "Standard terms. Complete surrender in 1 hour or we begin destroying their cities." His officers obeyed without question. The Dominion had refined intimidation into an art form. Their reputation preceded them across the galaxy. Most species surrendered before the first shot was fired. Torrin received the Hlath message and felt despair settle over him like a blanket. His fleet was damaged, his crew exhausted, his resources depleted. Facing a fresh Dominion fleet was suicide. But the alternative was slavery for his people and everyone on that human planet below. "We have to try," Mira said quietly. "Even if we can't win, we have to try." Ren checked his fighter systems. Half his squadron was destroyed. His own ship had taken damage that would normally require days of repairs. The fuel reserves were critical, but he would fly if ordered. That's what Communion peacekeepers did. Olivia gathered her senior officers for an emergency meeting. The room felt heavy with exhaustion and tension. They had just fought the Communion to a standstill. Now a larger threat had arrived, and they were expected to fight again. "We can't handle 200 ships," someone stated the obvious. "The Communion can't either," someone else added. David interrupted through the communication link. "But together we might have a chance." Everyone turned to look at Olivia. She had fought aliens once today. She had watched friends die in the void. The idea of trusting those same aliens working alongside them felt wrong, but the alternative was extinction or enslavement. "Contact Admiral Torrin," she said. "Tell him we need to talk fast." The joint command meeting happened via video link while engineers worked frantically to repair damaged ships. Torrin appeared on Olivia's screen, looking as exhausted as she felt. Behind him, Mira studied human data with obvious fascination despite the crisis. "Your species fights like nothing we have encountered," Torrin began. You accepted casualties we would consider unacceptable. You turned damaged vessels into weapons. You refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. We've had practice, Olivia answered shortly. Our history is mostly war, we noticed. But the Hlath Dominion has practice too. They have enslaved civilizations across 3 sectors. They have numbers we cannot match. Samantha joined the conversation, her translation protocols now functioning smoothly. Admiral Torin, what can you tell us about Hlath tactics? Torin shared everything. The Dominion preferred long-range bombardment. Their shields were excellent but designed for fighting other energy weapon fleets. Their crews were disciplined but came from conquered species forced into military service. The Hlath themselves were commanders, not frontline fighters. So their crew might not want to fight? David asked. They fight because the alternative is death. The Dominion executes deserters and their families. Olivia absorbed this information and formed a plan. A terrible, brutal, completely insane plan that might work if everyone was willing to accept massive losses. We need to combine our forces, she said. Your shields and energy weapons with our kinetic weapons and close-range tactics. You want to get close to them? Torin looked horrified. The Dominion will destroy any ship that approaches. Only if their shields hold. Your energy weapons soften the shields. Our kinetic weapons punch through. We coordinate the attacks, Mira leaned forward. You're proposing a joint tactical doctrine, combining our technological advantages while minimizing our weaknesses. Exactly, but we need to move fast. That 1-hour deadline is ticking. The next 40 minutes were chaos. Human and communion crews worked together through translated commands and improvised cooperation. Engineers jury-rigged communication systems. Tactical officers shared targeting data across incompatible computer systems. Pilots practiced formation flying with alien wingmates they had been trying to kill hours earlier. Ren found himself paired with a human pilot named Frank Morris. The same Morris who had fired the first shots of their earlier battle. They communicated through broken translation software. Learning each other's capabilities, you fly aggressive, Ren observed. You fly scared, Frank replied. Ren bristled at the insult, then realized it was true. Communion doctrine emphasized survival. Human doctrine emphasized winning even at terrible cost. Teach me, Ren said simply. The Hlath Dominion fleet moved into attack position with mechanical precision. Kreth expected no resistance. The deadline passed with no surrender. Time to demonstrate consequences. Target the human orbital facilities, Kreth ordered. Destroy them one at a time until they submit. The Dominion fleet opened fire with long-range weapons. Energy beams crossed the distance toward human space stations that housed millions of workers and their families. The combined human communion fleet intercepted the attack. Communion vessels positioned themselves between the Dominion weapons and human targets. Their shields absorbed the initial barrage while human vessels accelerated to combat speed behind them. The formation looked chaotic but functioned with surprising effectiveness. They're working together. Kreth studied the tactical display with confusion. The report said they were fighting each other. They were, leader. Until we arrived. Olivia coordinated the counterattack from Retribution's command center. Her voice stayed calm while her hands gripped the armrests hard enough to hurt. 32 communion ships and 43 human vessels against 200 Dominion warships. The mathematics were terrible. All ships execute attack pattern Delta. Communion forces maintain shield wall. Human forces prepare for close engagement. The combined fleet charged directly at the Dominion line. It was suicide by any conventional military standard. But conventions changed when Deathworlders entered the fight. Torin watched the battle unfold and saw warfare transform before his eyes. Communion ships held formation, shields overlapping to create protective zones. Human vessels used those zones as cover, building speed before bursting out to deliver devastating attacks. They coordinated without formal command structures, adapting in real time. A human destroyer took critical damage, its entire left side torn open by Dominion fire. Instead of retreating, it accelerated directly toward a Dominion cruiser and fired every remaining weapon. The cruiser's shields collapsed under the combined assault. Human kinetic rounds tore through its hull. The disabled human destroyer ejected its crew in escape pods. Then remote systems guided the derelict into a controlled collision with another Dominion vessel. Both ships tumbled away from the battle, crippled. Kreth realized his assumptions were wrong. These weren't two weakened fleets. This was something new. Something that combined the best aspects of both forces while covering each other's weaknesses. "Focus fire on the human vessels," he ordered. "They're the dangerous ones." But isolating human ships proved impossible. Communion shields protected them during approach. Human weapons destroyed any Dominion vessel that tried to close the trap. And when human ships did take damage, they kept fighting in ways that defied belief. Ren and Frank flew together through a storm of weapons fire. Frank pushed his fighter through maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart. Ren followed, learning to accept fear and fly anyway. They covered each other, communicated through gestures and simple words, and destroyed 7 Dominion fighters between them. "You fly better now," Frank observed. "You taught me courage," Ren admitted. The battle raged for hours. Ships on all sides took terrible damage. Casualties mounted, but the combined fleet held together, adapting and learning with every exchange. Communion crews learned to accept risks. Human crews learned to work behind protective shields instead of charging blindly forward. David monitored from Earth and coordinated the ground-based weapons. Long-range missiles launched from hidden planetary silos, adding their firepower to the orbital battle. The Dominion had never faced an enemy that fought from planet to orbit simultaneously. Kreth watched his fleet's numbers diminish and made a decision. The Dominion didn't fight to the last ship. They fought until victory seemed unlikely, then retreated to preserve resources. "All vessels withdraw," he ordered. "This system is not worth the cost." The Dominion fleet broke contact and jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving the battlefield strewn with debris from all 3 forces. 67 Dominion ships destroyed or disabled, 28 Communion vessels lost or beyond repair, 31 human ships reduced to scrap, but Earth still stood. The Communion fleet survived, and in the debris field, rescue teams from both species worked together to save anyone still alive, regardless of which side they had fought on. Olivia collapsed in her chair, exhausted beyond description. Her ship had survived but carried scars that would take months to repair. Across the communication link, Torin looked equally drained. "We won," Mira said quietly. "We survived," Torin corrected. "But yes, we survived together." Olivia looked at the cost displayed on her screens. So many dead, so many wounded. But Earth was safe. Her people were free. "Thank you," she told Torin, "for standing with us." "Thank you for teaching us how to fight," Torin replied. "The Communion has forgotten what war truly means. You reminded us." Frank and Ren docked their fighters in the same bay, exhausted and barely functional. They climbed out of their cockpits and faced each other. Ren extended his hand in what his computer suggested was a human gesture of respect. Frank shook it. "You're pretty good." "For an alien," Ren smiled tiredly. "You are terrifying. For anything." The alliance began there in moments of mutual respect earned through shared combat. Neither species had chosen this, but both had proven they could work together when necessary. The galaxy was taking notice. Mira had studied 217 alien species during her career as a xenobiologist. She thought she understood the diversity of life in the galaxy. Then she stepped onto Earth and realized she understood nothing. The gravity crushed her. Every step felt like carrying another person on her back. Her breathing came in labored gasps despite the oxygen-rich atmosphere. The Vithari had evolved on a gentle world where the strongest. Storms were light breezes and the most dangerous. Predators were herbivores that occasionally defended themselves. Earth was alive in ways that felt almost malicious. "Is it always like this?" she asked Samantha, who walked beside her with casual ease. Samantha looked around at the sunny day, the calm weather, the peaceful scene. "Like what?" "So hostile. The gravity, the atmospheric pressure, the temperature variations." "Oh." Samantha smiled. "This is a nice day. Wait until you experience a thunderstorm." Admiral Torin had brought a delegation of 12 to Earth's surface for formal first contact ceremonies. The Communion wanted to establish diplomatic relations, offer technological assistance, and hopefully prevent any future misunderstandings. The humans had agreed to host them in New Geneva, capital of the United Earth Government. Torin moved carefully through the city streets, accompanied by human guides who slowed their natural pace to accommodate alien visitors. Everything felt wrong. Too heavy, too bright, too intense. The humans built their cities to withstand conditions that would destroy most civilized architecture. Buildings stood solid like fortresses. Infrastructure ran deep underground, protected from surface disasters. Ren walked with Frank, who had volunteered to escort the pilot delegation. They had become unlikely friends during the battle, bonded by shared combat experience. Now Frank showed Ren around humanity's home with obvious pride. "This is where I grew up," Frank said, pointing to a residential district. "Normal gravity, normal weather, normal life. This is normal?" Ren watched storm clouds gather in the distance. His weather sensors predicted dangerous atmospheric conditions. Lightning, high winds, potential flooding. "Should we seek shelter from that?" Frank glanced at the clouds. "Nah, that's just a regular afternoon thing. Kids play outside and worse." The demonstration came later during a formal dinner held in a building designed to accommodate various species. Human engineers had modified a section to lower gravity for communion visitors. Torin appreciated the gesture, but noticed how uncomfortable humans looked in the reduced gravity. They moved awkwardly, like their bodies expected more resistance. David Park attended the dinner as Earth's military representative. He spent time talking with Torin about their respective doctrines, comparing notes on strategy and tactics. The conversation revealed fundamental differences in how each species approached conflict. "The communion prefers to avoid casualties," Torin explained. "We position our forces to demonstrate superior power, then negotiate surrender terms. Actual combat is considered failure." David nodded slowly. "Humans assume combat is inevitable. We prepare for worst-case scenarios and hope for better outcomes. Every soldier trains expecting to fight. Every ship carries weapons expecting to use them. That sounds exhausting. It is. But we've learned that hoping for peace doesn't create peace. Being ready for war sometimes prevents war." Olivia joined them partway through the dinner, still wearing her uniform. She had spent the day coordinating repairs to the combined fleet and managing the massive recovery effort. 60 ships needed repairs or replacement. Thousands of crew members required medical treatment. Bodies needed to be recovered and identified. "The Hlath will come back," she said without preamble. "They retreated, but they won't forget about Earth. We're a threat now." Torin agreed. "The Dominion never forgives defiance. They will return with more ships, more weapons, more determination. Then we need to be ready. Together." The word hung in the air between them. Together. It implied a formal alliance, shared resources, combined military planning. It meant humans and communion binding their fates together despite having nearly destroyed each other weeks earlier. "The Communion Council must approve any alliance," Torin said carefully. "They will have concerns. Your species is aggressive by our standards. Your methods cause casualties we find difficult to accept. Your entire civilization emerged from conflict and competition." Olivia met his eyes steadily. "And your civilization is dying. The Hlath aren't your only enemy. How many other aggressive species are expanding into communion space while you're too peaceful to stop them?" Torin flinched because she was right. The communion had been in decline for 3 centuries. Peaceful member species made excellent scientists, engineers, artists, and philosophers. But when aggressive empires emerged, the communion struggled to respond effectively. They won through technological superiority and overwhelming numbers, not through tactical brilliance or fighting spirit. Humans had both. Mira presented her findings during a late-night meeting with human scientists. She had spent 2 weeks studying Earth's biosphere, cataloging species, analyzing evolution patterns. Her conclusion shocked even herself. "Everything here is designed to kill everything else," she explained to a room full of researchers. "Your plants produce toxins. Your insects carry diseases. Your weather systems destroy infrastructure regularly. Even your microbiology is aggressively competitive. Life on Earth doesn't cooperate. It fights for every advantage." Dr. Cole listened carefully. "And humans evolved in the middle of all that. Humans evolved on top of all that. You're apex predators on a planet where almost everything is dangerous. Your bodies can heal from injuries that would kill most species. Your immune systems fight off infections constantly. Your psychology is built around surviving impossible odds and adapting to changing threats. So we're not normal?" Mira laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Normal species evolve on gentle worlds where competition is minimal and resources are abundant. They develop intelligence slowly, peacefully. You developed intelligence as a weapon. You used it to dominate your environment, then dominate each other, then dominate your entire planet. It's terrifying and fascinating simultaneously." The human scientists absorbed this information with mixed feelings. Pride that humanity had overcome such challenges. concern about how other species might view them, uncertainty about their place in the larger galactic community. "What does the communion think of us?" someone asked. Mira hesitated, then decided honesty was better. "They're afraid. Not of your weapons or your ships. They're afraid of what you represent. Change, aggression, a new way of approaching old problems. The communion has existed for thousands of years without changing its fundamental nature. Then you appeared and demonstrated that sometimes peace requires the capacity for violence." The formal alliance proposal came 3 weeks after first contact. The communion offered humanity membership in their organization, access to faster-than-light technology, advanced manufacturing, medical science, and established trade networks, thousands of worlds to explore, centuries of accumulated knowledge freely shared. In exchange, Earth would provide military expertise and combat forces. Human officers would train communion crews in aggressive tactics. Human engineers would help modernize communion ship designs. Human soldiers would deploy alongside communion peacekeepers to protect threatened worlds. The United Earth government debated for days. Some representatives wanted to accept immediately. Others worried about becoming mercenaries for a dying empire. Some saw opportunity while others saw exploitation. Olivia testified before the government assembly, explaining the military situation from her perspective. "The galaxy is more dangerous than we thought. The Hlath Dominion is just one threat among many. If we reject this alliance, we'll face those threats alone with primitive technology and limited resources. If we accept, we gain allies, knowledge, and time to build our strength." "But we'll be fighting their wars," someone objected. "We'll be fighting wars that will eventually reach Earth anyway. Better to fight them in distant systems with allies than fight them alone at our doorstep." David supported her position. "The communion needs us, yes, but we need them too. They have knowledge we'd take centuries to develop independently. They have connections to thousands of civilizations. They can teach us about the galaxy while we teach them how to survive it." The vote passed with a narrow majority. Earth would join the communion as a full member species with equal voting rights. In return, humanity would establish military training programs and provide combat support when requested. Torin received the news while his fleet completed repairs in Earth orbit. He felt relief and concern in equal measure. Relief that humanity had agreed. Concern about what this meant for the communion's future. Ren approached him privately after the announcement. "Admiral, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. The humans changed how I think about combat. They taught me that accepting risk is sometimes necessary, that survival isn't the only goal, that sometimes you fight because others depend on you, even if fighting means you might not survive." "This troubles you?" "No, sir. It empowers me. I've always wanted to be a protector, but communion doctrine made me cautious. Human doctrine makes me effective. I think we needed them. I think we've needed something like them for a long time." Torin looked out at Earth through the viewport. The blue planet hung in space, beautiful and deadly. A world that spawned a species capable of fighting impossible battles and winning through sheer determination. "Perhaps you're right," Torin said quietly. "Perhaps the communion has been asleep for too long. And perhaps it took a species of Deathworlders to wake us up." 6 months later, the first joint training facility opened on a communion station near their core worlds. Human instructors arrived with equipment, methodology, and attitudes that shocked the peaceful species who volunteered for military service. The galaxy watched these developments with growing concern. Some species saw opportunity and sought their own alliances with the human communion partnership. Others saw threat and began forming defensive pacts. A few aggressive empires started, planning coordinated strikes against both Earth and communion territories. But one thing became clear to everyone. The galaxy had changed. The wrong signal had brought the wrong species into contact, and that accident might have saved them both. The training station orbited a purple gas giant in neutral space, deliberately, positioned far from both Earth and the communion core worlds. Sergeant Rachel Webb stood in the zero-gravity combat simulator and watched her communion students struggle with concepts that came naturally to every human child. They were intelligent, dedicated, and completely unprepared for the philosophy she was teaching. "Combat is not about survival," she repeated for the 5th time that morning. "Combat is about completing the mission, If you survive, excellent. If you don't survive but complete the mission, you've still won. A Vithari cadet named Lorne raised his hand hesitantly. But if we die, we cannot complete future missions. Correct. So you train hard enough that you probably won't die. But you accept that death is possible, and you do the job anyway. The concept clearly disturbed them. Communion military doctrine had always emphasized preservation of life above all else. Casualties were considered failures of command. Leaders who lost crew members faced investigations and potential removal. Human doctrine was different. Casualties were expected. Leaders who avoided all risk were considered ineffective. The goal was to win, not to survive. Rachel pushed her students through scenarios designed to test their psychological limits. Simulated ship damage where saving the crew meant abandoning the mission. Tactical situations where the only winning move involved accepting casualties. Moral dilemmas where perfect solutions didn't exist. Most of her students failed the first month. Some quit. Others complained to their superiors. A few adapted and started thinking like warriors instead of peacekeepers. Lorne was one of those who adapted. He struggled at first, his Vithari instincts screaming against every aggressive action. But he watched human instructors demonstrate techniques, observed how they thought about problems, and slowly rewired his own thinking. I understand now, he told Rachel after passing a particularly brutal simulator exercise. You don't think about what you might lose, you think about what you must protect. Exactly. You fight for something, not against something. It makes all the difference. Similar training programs ran across 12 communion stations. Human instructors taught hand-to-hand combat, damage control procedures, tactical planning, and psychological resilience. They brought equipment from Earth designed to stress test both bodies and minds. They pushed communion volunteers harder than they'd ever been pushed. Admiral Torren visited the stations regularly, monitoring progress and dealing with complaints. Some communion officials thought the humans were too harsh. Others worried that aggressive human methods would corrupt peaceful communion values. Torren understood both concerns, but sided with the humans. The galaxy is harsh, he told the Communion Council during a heated debate. Our values are admirable, but they won't protect us if we can't enforce them. These humans are teaching our people how to be strong without losing who we are. Olivia commanded the military cooperation program from Earth, coordinating between human forces and communion requests. She spent most of her time in video conferences, managing logistics and dealing with cultural misunderstandings that arose constantly. The biggest challenge wasn't teaching communion forces to fight. It was teaching them to trust humans. Centuries of peaceful development had made most communion species cautious of aggressive behavior. They saw human combat methods and worried about serving alongside species that seemed to embrace violence. Some questioned whether humans actually wanted peace or just enjoyed fighting. Olivia addressed these concerns during a joint command conference, attended by representatives from 37 species. She spoke bluntly, knowing that diplomatic language would be misinterpreted. Humans don't love war, she said. We hate it. Every human military officer I know wishes they never had to fight. But we recognize that sometimes combat is necessary to protect what matters. Your species have the luxury of avoiding violence because you've never faced serious threats. We didn't have that luxury. Our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. Then our own species tried to kill each other. We learned to fight because the alternative was extinction. A representative from the peaceful Helion species asked, "But don't you worry that teaching us violence will make us violent?" No, violence and aggression are different. Violence is a tool. Aggression is a choice. We're teaching you the tool so you can defend yourselves. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. Samantha Cole worked on a different kind of integration. She established linguistic and cultural exchange programs, helping humans and communion species understand each other beyond military cooperation. Her team created comprehensive guides to human culture, history, and psychology. One section of her guide explained human attachment to their home planet. Most spacefaring species viewed their homeworlds as museums or nature preserves, beautiful but impractical for modern life. Humans remained deeply connected to Earth despite expanding into space. Earth-shaped humans, her guide explained. Every aspect of human psychology reflects adaptation to Deathworld conditions. The need to form strong social bonds came from surviving threats too large for individuals. The tendency toward innovation came from environments that changed faster than evolution could adapt. The capacity for hope despite terrible circumstances came from facing extinction regularly and surviving anyway. Mira reviewed Samantha's work and added her own observations from a biological perspective. She had spent months studying human physiology and remained amazed by how overbuilt humans were for normal civilized life. Humans can survive injuries that would kill most species instantly, she wrote. They have redundant organs, rapid healing, and psychological resilience that borders on impossible. In normal environments, these abilities seem excessive, but in combat or crisis situations, humans become nearly unstoppable. Their bodies are designed for war, whether they want that or not. The first joint military operation came 6 months into the alliance. A communion colony world called Talmar reported attacks by the Vren hegemony, an aggressive empire that had been expanding unchecked for decades. The Vren typically conquered through overwhelming numbers and brutal efficiency. Tauren assembled a joint fleet of 24 vessels. 12 communion ships provided shields, sensors, and energy weapons. 12 human ships provided kinetic weapons, boarding teams, and tactical leadership. Olivia took personal command, with Tauren serving as joint operations coordinator. The fleet reached Talmar to find the colony already under siege. 40 Vren warships surrounded the planet, bombarding defensive positions and preparing for ground invasion. The colonists huddled in underground shelters, praying for rescue. They outnumber us 2-1, Tauren observed. Standard odds for humans, Olivia replied calmly. She studied the tactical situation, analyzing Vren formations and weapon deployments. Their doctrine looked conventional: position heavy ships in siege formation, grind down defenses through sustained bombardment, land troops when resistance collapsed. We'll break their formation, she decided. Human ships take point. Communion ships provide support. We punch through their line and threaten their command vessel directly. That's insane, a Communion tactical officer protested. We should maintain defensive positions and force them to come to us. They won't come to us. They'll finish conquering the planet while we wait. We don't have time for careful approaches. Wren flew with Frank in joint fighter formations. They had done this before, but never with such high stakes. Below them, millions of Communion colonists waited for salvation. Ahead of them, Vren warships prepared to destroy any rescue attempt. Ready? Frank asked over the communication link. Ready, Wren confirmed, though his body screamed warnings about the upcoming acceleration. The joint fleet engaged. Human ships accelerated to combat speed, building velocity while Communion vessels held formation behind them. The Vren fleet opened fire with long-range weapons. Energy beams and missile salvos filled space between the two forces. Communion shields absorbed the initial barrage, protecting human ships during their approach. The coordination worked exactly as trained. Each fleet covered the other's weaknesses while amplifying their strengths. Human vessels crashed into Vren formation like hammers. Kinetic weapons fired at point-blank range, overwhelming Vren shields through sheer force. Boarding teams launched from human ships, carrying weapons designed to fight in zero-gravity and hostile environments. The Vren had never faced an enemy that fought this way. Their military doctrine assumed rational opponents who valued their lives. Humans treated casualties as acceptable costs. Communion forces trained by humans now operated the same way. Rachel Webb led a boarding team onto a Vren cruiser. Her squad moved through hostile corridors while the ship's crew tried desperately to repel them. Human combat doctrine emphasized speed and violence. No room clearing, no careful advances. Just overwhelming force applied at the enemy's weakest points. Her team reached the ship's command center in 12 minutes. The Vren commander surrendered immediately, shocked that anyone would board a functional warship. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Joint tactics proved devastatingly effective. Vren ships fell one by one, their crews unable to adapt to an enemy that fought with human ferocity and Communion technology combined. The Vren fleet commander, realizing defeat was inevitable, ordered a retreat. His remaining ships fled the system, abandoning the siege. The colonists emerged from shelters to find their world saved by the combined fleet. Tauren watched the victory with mixed emotions. They had won decisively with minimal casualties. But the methods still troubled him. Humans made war look easy because they accepted costs that Communion forces traditionally avoided. "You're still uncomfortable," Olivia observed. "Yes, we won. We saved Talmar, but we did it by thinking like humans, by accepting that some ships would be damaged, some crew members would be injured, some lives would be lost. That's not how the Communion traditionally operates. But it works. Yes, it works." They stood together on Retribution's observation deck, watching Communion and human ships work side by side on rescue operations. Despite everything, despite the cultural differences and the violence, they were building something new. An alliance that combined the best aspects of both civilizations. Word of the victory spread quickly through both Communion space and the larger galaxy. Other threatened species sent diplomatic inquiries to Earth and the Communion Council. Aggressive empires paused their expansions, recalculating risks now that their targets had effective defenders. The Hlath Dominion monitored these developments with growing concern. Kreth studied reports from his intelligence networks and recognized the threat. The Human Communion alliance was growing stronger. More species were joining. The balance of power was shifting. "We should have destroyed them when they were weak," he told his advisors. "It's not too late. We can assemble a larger fleet." "No, larger won't work. We need smarter. We need to break their alliance before it becomes unbreakable." Plans formed in the darkness. The Dominion would strike, but not with simple military force. They would target the alliance itself, exploit the cultural differences, and drive a wedge between humans and the Communion. But they underestimated one critical factor. The alliance wasn't built on treaties or mutual benefit. It was built on respect earned through shared combat. And that kind of bond didn't break easily. 5 years changed everything. Rachel Webb commanded an entire training academy now, overseeing 3,000 Communion cadets from 20 different species. What started as experimental cooperation had become standard operating procedure. Joint doctrine manuals replaced old Communion peacekeeping guidelines. Mixed species crews served together across dozens of vessels. The concept of fighting to win rather than fighting to survive had spread throughout Communion military forces. Lorne stood beside her during a graduation ceremony, now an instructor himself. The nervous Vithari cadet who couldn't understand why anyone would accept casualties had become a warrior who understood that protection sometimes required sacrifice. He wore scars from the Second Battle of Talmar, where he led a boarding team that saved a human destroyer from Vren counterattack. "I barely recognize our military anymore," Lorne admitted quietly while watching the graduating class perform combat maneuvers that would have been considered impossible 5 years ago. "Is that good or bad?" Rachel asked. "Good. Definitely good. We were so afraid of losing who we were that we nearly lost everything. The humans didn't change us. They reminded us that strength and compassion can coexist." Mira published her comprehensive study of human psychology and biology to widespread acclaim throughout scientific communities. Her work became required reading for anyone interacting with humanity. She concluded that humans weren't anomalies, but rather examples of what evolution produced under extreme selective pressure. "Most intelligent species develop on gentle worlds," she wrote in her final chapter. "They evolve intelligence as a tool for cooperation and resource management. Humans evolved intelligence as a weapon for survival. This creates fundamental differences in how they approach problems. When faced with impossible situations, most species seek accommodation. Humans seek victory. This isn't aggression. It's adaptation to an environment that rewarded persistence above all else." Admiral Torren commanded the entire joint fleet now, promoted after successfully defending 7 Communion worlds from various aggressive empires. His flagship was a hybrid design that combined Communion shield technology with human weapon systems and tactical philosophy. The crew mixed both species naturally, working together with practiced efficiency. Olivia served as his second in command, though their relationship had evolved beyond military hierarchy. They were partners in building something unprecedented, a military force that fought with human determination and Communion values combined. Together they reviewed intelligence reports about the Hlath Dominion. After 5 years of quiet, the Dominion was moving again. Reports indicated massive fleet buildup in their core territories. Diplomatic channels revealed nothing, but the signs pointed to major military action planned. "They're preparing to hit us hard," Olivia said. Not just one target. Multiple simultaneous strikes designed to overwhelm our response capacity. Torin agreed. They waited for us to expand. Now we're committed to defending multiple systems with forces spread thin. Classic strategy. We need to concentrate our forces, pull back from secondary positions and establish strong defensive zones. That means abandoning some of our allies. They joined the coalition because we promised protection. I know, but defending everywhere means defending nowhere effectively. We make hard choices, or we lose everything. The decision went to the Galactic Defense Coalition, the formal organization that had grown from the Human Communion Alliance. 17 species now belonged, contributing ships and personnel to mutual defense. The council debated for 3 days before accepting the strategic withdrawal plan. Some member species felt betrayed. They had trusted the coalition to protect them. Now they were being told to prepare their own defenses while the main fleet concentrated elsewhere. Diplomatic relationships strained under the pressure. Dr. Samantha Cole worked frantically to maintain coalition unity. She organized video conferences, translated perspectives, and helped species understand each other's concerns. The work was exhausting but necessary. The Dominion wanted the coalition to fracture. Preventing that required constant effort. General David Park coordinated Earth's contribution to the defense plan. Humanity had expanded significantly in 5 years, establishing colonies in 7 systems and building shipyards throughout their territory. Earth now produced 40% of the coalition's military vessels and trained 70% of its combat personnel. We've become the arsenal of the coalition, he observed to Samantha, during a rare moment of shared downtime. Some species worry about that. They fear we're becoming too influential. Do you think we are? Samantha considered carefully. I think we're influential because we're effective. But yes, there's risk. If we're not careful, we could end up leading the coalition just because everyone else defers to our military expertise. That's not a true alliance. That's hegemony with extra steps. The Hlath Dominion struck 3 months later, exactly as predicted. Simultaneous attacks hit 14 coalition positions across 4 sectors. The Dominion had assembled a fleet of over 800 vessels, coordinating attacks to divide coalition forces and create situations where no single target could receive adequate support. Kreth commanded from his flagship at the center of the largest attack force. His target was the human colony world of New Terra, established 3 years ago and home to 8 million settlers. Destroying a human world would demonstrate the coalition's inability to protect its members. It would break the psychological advantage humans had maintained. 200 Dominion warships entered New Terra's system against 37 coalition defenders. The mathematics favored the Dominion heavily. Kreth expected victory within hours. He did not expect the humans to fight like cornered animals. Commander Helen Park commanded the defense fleet. She was David's daughter, raised in the military tradition that emphasized protecting others above protecting yourself. Her fleet was outnumbered 6-1. Retreat would save her ships but abandon millions of civilians. She never considered retreat. All ships aggressive defense pattern, she ordered calmly. We hold until reinforcements arrive or we don't hold at all. Her fleet moved into positions that looked like suicide. Ships spread throughout the system, creating overlapping fields of fire that required the Dominion to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Human ships positioned themselves between Dominion vessels and the planet, using their own hulls as shields. The battle began with expected violence. Dominion weapons tore through coalition shields and armor. 4 ships destroyed in the first exchange, 7 more heavily damaged. But the humans didn't break formation. They held position and returned fire with devastating accuracy. Ren led fighter squadrons in desperate defense of orbital facilities. His mixed-species wing flew with precision that came from years of training together. They had learned from humans but maintained their own cultural strengths. Vithari perception combined with human aggression created something neither could achieve alone. Wing 3, cover the medical station, Ren ordered. Wing 5 with me on the Dominion flagship approach. His fighters engaged Dominion bombers headed for civilian targets. The fight was brutal and close range. Ren took damage but kept flying, kept fighting, kept protecting others because that's what warriors did. Admiral Torin received the distress call from New Terra and immediately diverted the main fleet. Olivia coordinated the response, calculating jump points and arrival times while managing other ongoing battles across coalition space. We can't help everyone, she said flatly. We have to prioritize. New Terra has 8 million civilians, Torin replied. 6 other battles have similar numbers at risk. We make impossible choices or the Dominion makes them for us. They chose New Terra not because human lives mattered more, but because Helen's defense was buying time. Other positions had collapsed quickly. New Terra held, and that created opportunity. The reinforcement fleet jumped in 12 hours after the battle started. Helen's fleet had lost 19 ships. The survivors were damaged and low on ammunition, but they still held formation, still protected the planet. Torin's fleet numbered 73 vessels, assembled from 6 different sectors. The combined force evened the odds considerably. Now it was 270 against 210. Kreth realized his mistake immediately. He had expected the coalition to spread its forces, trying to help everyone and helping no one effectively. Instead, they had concentrated on a single position and turned a massacre into a fair fight. All ships withdraw, he ordered. But withdrawing from an engagement with humans was easier ordered than executed. Coalition forces pursued aggressively, cutting off retreat paths and forcing continuous combat. Dominion ships that tried to escape took concentrated fire. Those that stood to fight found themselves surrounded. The battle raged for 6 more hours. Both sides took terrible losses. Wreckage filled the space around New Terra. But when the Dominion fleet finally escaped through faster-than-light jumps, they left 41 destroyed ships behind. The coalition lost 33. Victories elsewhere were mixed. 8 coalition positions fell to Dominion attacks. 6 held successfully. The overall result was strategic stalemate, but with one critical difference. The Dominion had committed enormous resources and failed to break the coalition. Kreth returned to Dominion space knowing his position was compromised. He had promised easy victory and delivered costly stalemate. The Dominion leadership did not tolerate failure. Within weeks, new intelligence reached coalition commanders. Internal strife was disrupting the Dominion. Conquered species were rebelling, encouraged by the coalition's successful defense. The Dominion's empire was cracking. 3 species formally requested asylum and coalition membership. Their representatives arrived at diplomatic stations with stories of Dominion brutality and desperate hope that the coalition would protect them. The council debated accepting the refugees, knowing it would provoke further Dominion anger. Olivia argued for acceptance during the council meeting. The Dominion is already our enemy. They just tried to destroy 14 of our positions. Accepting refugees doesn't change that, but it does demonstrate what the coalition stands for. We protect those who need protection. Even if it means more war? A council member asked. War is already here. The only question is whether we face it with honor or pragmatism. The coalition accepted the refugees and prepared for Dominion retaliation that never came. Instead, more conquered species rebelled. The Dominion found itself fighting internal conflicts while maintaining external threats. Their empire, built on fear and overwhelming force, discovered that neither worked against opponents who refused to surrender. 2 years later, the Dominion collapsed completely. The conquered species declared independence and formed their own confederation. Some joined the coalition, others remained neutral. But the era of Dominion expansion ended. Torin stood on Earth's surface visiting for the first time in 3 years. He had attended the formal victory celebration in New Geneva, accepting honors from the United Earth government. Now he took time to simply experience the planet that had changed everything. The gravity still felt heavy. The weather still seemed dangerous. The entire environment remained hostile by communion standards. But Torin understood now what Mira had discovered years ago. Earth didn't create aggressive species, it created resilient ones. And humanity shared that resilience with anyone willing to learn. Olivia found him watching a thunderstorm from a protected observation area. Lightning split the sky while rain fell in sheets that would terrify most spacefaring species. Still looks like apocalypse to you? She asked. Yes, but I understand why humans love it. This planet tried to kill you for millions of years and you survived. That creates a certain pride. We didn't just survive. We thrived, and now we're helping others do the same. They stood together, human and Vithari, watching the storm. The wrong signal had brought them together accidentally. But 5 years later, the accident had become purpose. The coalition now numbered 29 species. Joint training academies operated in 12 systems. Hybrid design ships patrolled protected space. Cultural exchange programs taught understanding. Military cooperation ensured safety. Rachel graduated her 5,000th student and reflected on how far they had come. Lorne commanded his own vessel, leading mixed-species crews with confidence. Frank and Wren flew together still, friends who had learned each other's languages and visited each other's homeworlds. Mira continued her research, now studying how cooperation changed societies. Her latest work explored how the Coalition was creating new cultural patterns that borrowed from all member species. Humans learned patience from the Vithari. Vithari learned courage from humans. Other species contributed their own strengths, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. Samantha saw her linguistic work become standard throughout Coalition space. Young people from dozens of species grew up learning multiple languages naturally. They formed friendships across species barriers, served together in military and civilian roles, and built futures that their ancestors never imagined. David retired from military service and became ambassador to the Communion Council. He spent his time building diplomatic relationships and ensuring humans remained partners, not masters. The Coalition's strength came from equality, and maintaining that required constant vigilance. Helen received command of the Coalition's Rapid Response Fleet, the force responsible for handling emerging crises across protected space. Her defense of New Terra had become legendary, studied in every military academy as an example of how determination could defeat overwhelming odds. The galaxy noticed these changes. Aggressive empires became more cautious, aware that attacking Coalition members meant fighting humans and everyone humans had trained. Peaceful species sought Coalition membership for protection and opportunity. The balance of power shifted gradually but definitively. 10 years after the wrong signal brought them together, Torrin and Olivia stood on the bridge of their joint flagship during a formal ceremony. The Coalition officially renamed itself the Galactic Union, acknowledging that it had grown beyond its original defensive purpose into something larger. "We built something good," Torrin said quietly. "From misunderstanding and violence, we built something worth protecting." Olivia smiled. "Because that's what humans do. We take impossible situations and find ways to survive them. Then we help others survive too. The Communion was dying before you arrived. We were too peaceful, too gentle, too unwilling to change. You reminded us that strength isn't incompatible with compassion, that fighting can be an act of love if you're fighting to protect others. And you reminded us that winning isn't everything, that how you fight matters as much as whether you win." They looked out at the assembled fleet, hundreds of vessels representing dozens of species. Each ship carried crews who trained together, fought together, and trusted each other despite coming from completely different evolutionary backgrounds. The wrong signal had brought the wrong species together at the perfect time. Humanity hadn't rescued the Communion. The Communion hadn't civilized humanity. Instead, they had saved each other and built something neither could have created alone. Somewhere in the depths of space, an old probe's distress beacon continued broadcasting its automated message. Help, danger, unknown threat. The message that had started everything still called out into the void, unaware that it had already been answered in ways its creators never imagined. The galaxy was safer because humans learned to look beyond their own world. The Communion survived because they learned from species they initially feared. And across dozens of systems, young people from different worlds served side by side, building futures based on cooperation rather than conquest. The wrong signal brought them together. But what they built was exactly right.